Did he do it, right?
Yeah.
I know
He did
you've been heavy on social media talking about it.
He did it. And I'm the only one who's been vocal about this long before it actually. But I also didn't participate. I also didn't go to those parties.
Yeah.
So a lot of the celebrity culture that you don't hear saying anything is because they participated.
The courtroom had barely emptied before 50 Cent made his move. The ink on the verdict was still drying, the cameras were still rolling, and the public hadn't even...
I haven't had issues with Puffy. I don't like him like that. Like, I don't like things that he would do and make me uncomfortable.
So we're speaking on Diddy. We're speaking on Puff.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't have that thing where, we ain't had no thing. I wasn't sending nothing at him, big. If it was on the street side like that, we would be actively doing things to each other.
Right.
And we wasn't doing that, right? So it gets to... With Jay, definitely not that. That's definitely not. It's just being competitive.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I look at it, I go, whoa. So I always go into what would I do in a situation like this? Like when that type of thing happens. And I'm going, I don't know. I hope things are all right for him internally.
Speaking on?
I mean, at the crib. Because in the statement they mentioned his
you're talking Jay.
His daughter
Gotcha.
would, being old enough to, because she about 13.
Right.
So it's the same age as.
But that didn't stop 50. He hit the internet with a revelation so raw, so loaded, it detonated across the industry like a bomb. Just moments after the jury handed down Diddy's guilty verdict, 50 Cent took the gloves off.
50 Cent's name came up during the testimony this week of Capricorn Clark. She is a former assistant of Sean Combs who went on to become the head of marketing for his Sean John clothing brand. Clark rose successfully and professionally through the ranks of Diddy's world during her time working for him, which stretched between 2004 to 2018, so she saw a lot. Clark claimed that Diddy would threaten her, and she says he even kidnapped her in 2011. All of this matters as we build up to how 50 Cent kind of factors into what she said on the stand. Now, Capricorn Clark started working for Bad Boy after she worked for Death Row Records. Now, that's surprising, since Death Row was ran by perhaps Diddy's most hated enemy, Suge Knight. Clark said that one of her good friends had a baby with Suge Knight, and that's how she knew him. And in perhaps the most shocking story from her testimony, Clark claimed that shortly after she started working for Diddy, Diddy and his security guards took her to Central Park after dark, and Diddy said, quote, "He told me he didn't know that I had anything to do with Suge Knight, and if anything happened, he would have to kill me." It is an allegation that paints Combs as someone who is ready to take a life. But as Capricorn Clark's testimony continued, she brought up another rival of Sean Diddy Combs and another allegation that he made an ominous threat of violence. Clark testified, when working for Diddy, they went to a press event at MTV and 50 Cent was there. And just wait until you hear what she says Diddy told 50's manager. 50 Cent's real name is Curtis Jackson. He rose to fame in the early 2000s. You might remember songs like In the Club. You might remember that he was the leader of the rap group G-Unit. Now, 50 grew up in Jamaica, Queens, New York. Diddy, also a New York native. He was born in Harlem, grew up in Mount Vernon, New York, just about 20 miles away. And even though they both had success in music, they both rose to fame representing the city of New York and the rap scene there, they have been longtime rivals. In 2006, 50 Cent released a diss track about Diddy. So almost 20 years ago, this goes back a long way. And in that diss track, he says, quote, "Who shot Biggie Smalls? We don't get 'em. They gon' kill us all. Man, Puffy know who hit that expletive. Man, that expletive soft." Now, 50 is accusing Combs there of knowing who killed his friend, the notorious B.I.G. Christopher Wallace. Wallace and Puffy were incredibly close, but Wallace was shot and killed in a drive-by shooting in Los Angeles in 1997, and no one has ever been charged for pulling the trigger. This all happened during really the height of the East Coast-West Coast rap rivalry of the 90s, which involved Suge Knight, who we mentioned earlier. 50 Cent has also accused Diddy of orchestrating the murder of death row rapper Tupac Shakur, who died in 1996 in a Las Vegas drive-by shooting. This is Dwayne Keefe D. Davis. He was arrested in September 2023, and he is the only person facing charges related to Tupac's murder. But 50 Cent has continued to push the allegation that Sean Combs either knows something or did something for Tupac to end up dead, though Diddy has denied that.
And what he revealed next didn't just add fuel to the fire. It lit the whole house ablaze. For years, 50 Cent has hinted. Cryptic posts, sarcastic tweets, shady interviews. Everyone knew he had receipts, but no one expected him to drop them like this. At the very moment the court put the nail in Diddy's coffin. And this wasn't some throwaway diss track or a petty Instagram jab. This was detailed, serious, explosive. According to 50, what the public heard in court was just the tip of the iceberg. He claimed there were files, videos, and testimonies so dark they didn't even make it into trial. Protected by legal red tape, buried under NDAs, or too risky to expose without an ironclad verdict in place. But now, with the trial concluded and the world watching, 50 Cent flipped the switch.
Verdict motions on or before July 30th of this year, and the government respond on or before August 20th. And then the government requests that if they be permitted to submit its summary of offense conduct on or before July 11th of 2025, and the defense doesn't object to that. So we'll see a lot more documents being filed that we're able to kind of talk about, hopefully a little bit more, but it seems that it's just a bunch of documents that'll be filed before the eventual sentencing hearing.
You know what I think is interesting? The post-trial motions. So typically speaking, those could be like a motion for a new trial where the court would vacate the judgment and allow for a new trial, rarely granted, but may be done if the interest of justice so requires. There's a motion for judgment of acquittal, so the court could set aside the jury's verdict, allow the defendant to go free, and there's a motion to vacate, set aside, or correct a sentence, and I'm told that it's often successful for the purpose of correcting when there's a clerical error in the sentence. Now, assuming Combs has valid legal grounds to support any of this, I imagine he will file whatever motion he can for relief from either the verdict or the sentence. Then again, I don't know. He got a very favorable ruling. Obviously, he was convicted. He's not entirely happy with it, and his defense counsel explained that. But they also, in their press conference after the verdict, they were jubilant. They were ecstatic. And I wonder if he gets a favorable sentence, is he even going to challenge this? I mean, they seem happy.
Yeah, they seem ecstatic because the emotions that kind of ran outside of the courtroom, it was kind of double that inside the courtroom where all the defense attorneys were hugging, they were crying. So seeing them outside in the press conference, all kind of holding hands, going up, that was just a little slice of the cake from what we all saw inside that federal courtroom. But I think it can kind of go both ways, and that's mainly because Sean Combs is still behind bars right now. The judge didn't grant him bail even after the verdict, and I think his reasoning might give us a little kind of picture into what the sentencing might possibly look like, because the judge even pointed out during his denying of Diddy's bail after his conviction, which were on counts 3 and 5, kind of talking back to what had happened in June of 2024 with Jane and the violent altercation that happened over at Jane's apartment. And so I'm thinking if the judge is already kind of on his mind about the whole domestic violence aspect and the physical violence that was exuded from the defendant, even just last year, I think it's possible maybe the judge, even if he hears from the family, even if he hears from Sean Combs' friends, that it's possible it might be kind of a little bit of a tougher sentence than maybe the defense was expecting.
Well, look, I think the defense might be wanting to take advantage of this, right? Now, the judge said, even though I'm denying bail and I'm looking at the violence factor, it's not a preview of what I'm going to do for sentencing. But I think this is the opportunity for the defense to submit any kind of...
He released statements, footage teases, and insider reports, painting Diddy not just as a manipulator or abuser, but as the orchestrator of a decade-spanning machine built on silence, fear, and indulgence. In his words, now the world gets to see what the industry's been whispering about behind closed doors. Social media caught fire. Posts that had been dismissed as trolling suddenly had context. Rumors now had receipts. 50's posts weren't just viral. They were surgical. He named names, dates, venues. He referenced off-the-books events attended by celebrities who are now scrambling to issue statements. One clip allegedly shows Diddy giving orders at one of the so-called freak-off gatherings, with faces blurred and audio manipulated. But the insinuations? Unmistakable. The industry isn't just shaken, it's frozen. PR teams are panicking, celebs are ghosting, labels are cutting ties. This isn't about Diddy anymore. This is about the entire web of people who knew, suspected, or benefited.
Documentary that he did, it was like, oh, that's just Puff because he's always just so angry. And then it's just this whole other level in the trial where it just, as an attorney, I mean, how effective has the government been, as you just read, and we can only read transcripts really and kind of hear from the people we have in the courtroom, but just at this point, how effective has the government been in painting the picture of this isn't just someone who was a domestic abuser, this isn't someone who was just a mean boss, but this was a racketeer who was running a criminal enterprise?
Yeah, and I think the forced labor issue. I think they've done an excellent job with that. With the transcripts I've been reading, a lot of the people are saying that they worked for 20 hours. Like that's the magic number, 20 hours straight. They, on a good day, we heard you'll get 4 hours of sleep. On a bad day, you'll get 4 hours of sleep. I think one of the what is it? A bodyguard said, if you sleep, you're getting fired. Like it was more rhythmic than that. I don't know, but you couldn't sleep around him. And I think that's what we saw with Making the Band. But again, we really didn't believe it. We thought it was for entertainment purposes. We didn't think someone could really act like this. And if an employee gave any pushback, they would either be terminated or they'd be threatened with reputational damage. They would be threatened with being blackballed, or they actually would be blackballed. And I think the government is doing an excellent job of proving forced labor.
And on that forced labor part, because on one hand, and I found it interesting, like George Kaplan, who is a former personal assistant for Diddy, like detailed all these, witnessing the abuse, he said, of Cassie. And then he was someone who would start work at 9:30 in the morning. And I think he said sometimes he went home at 7 o'clock in the morning the next day. And that's just what it was like. And he still, at the end of his testimony, said something along the lines of, he respects Diddy as this business person. In the eyes of the law and in this trial, what's the line between, well, this was a guy who just worked his employees really hard, to the point of where it was a forced labor issue where he was breaking the law?
So I think the perfect forced labor issue is, I think, Mia's testimony that we read through today. And, I think it's really easy for someone to say, well, hey, why don't you just leave? Well, one of the elements with forced labor is if you leave, you're threatened with reputational damage. You're threatened with being blackballed. You're threatened with psychological manipulation. So I think, that's a perfect example. With respect to Kaplan's testimony, I think what was so important is when he said toward the end of his testimony, I believe, that Diddy's call him a god amongst men. Well, how did he become a god amongst men? Did he use his enterprise? Did he use his influence? Did he use coercion? Did he use threats? Did he use violence to become a god amongst men? So I think, whereas a lot of people may think that was really flattering toward Diddy, I thought that was more damaging than anything because of what he did to become a god amongst men. Does that make sense to you?
No, it does. And that's an interesting way to look at it, because at the end of Kaplan's testimony, we did a show specifically, and I found it interesting because, like, really in the grand scheme of all the witnesses, George Kaplan's probably, by the end of this, someone that we may not even remember his name. But I just found it interesting where he was worked so hard. He was cleaning up the hotel rooms, and talked about all the baby oil and stuff that he was cleaning up in the hotel room. So you're just like, what kind of job is this? And then at the end, he's still like, yeah, it was almost, he was trying to be complimentary. But you look at that and you're like, the view that people had of Sean Combs within Bad Boy and Combs Enterprises, it was beyond, it felt like a boss, because there's still this, like, I need to give him a compliment at the end of the testimony.
And 50 Cent? He's not slowing down. He's framing this as a reckoning, a purge of fake loyalty and hidden rot. Journalists are already dissecting his claims. Some are confirming details with anonymous insiders. Others are rushing to protect their own reputations, deleting old collaborations, scrubbing shoutouts, scrubbing socials. One high-level executive allegedly resigned just hours after 50's post went up. Coincidence? No one believes that. What's most chilling? 50 says this is only part one, that more is coming. He's called it a catalog of accountability. And if even half of what he's threatening to drop comes true, the music industry could be facing its biggest scandal in modern history. And through all of this, Diddy remains silent, locked down. No new statements, no new legal team announcements, nothing. The silence is deafening. And 50? He's filling that silence with precision strikes. It's no longer just a rivalry.
far. So if you think about Sean Combs and his time that he served, he's nearly at a year. So if the judge were to go for the defense's route, he could be out within a year. Whereas the government was like, okay, no, under the guidelines, it's really 51 to 61 months. So from the government's point of view, Jesse, it seems like there is kind of a disagreement as to how long the defendant should serve as far as his time goes. But either way, he'll still have time served. And so depending on whether it's 51 to 61 months or like the defense wants 21 to 27 months, it'll ultimately be up to the judge to make that decision.
And didn't the prosecutor say something about a pre-sentencing investigation report? And just to give everybody an idea about what that is, that you got to give the judge as much information as possible before sentencing. And particularly where there's a sentence that's based a lot on the judge's discretion. And that usually consists of, an interview with the defendant, history, background, family, education, employment, criminal history, finances, health, alcohol, drug use. You speak to family members, friends, employers. There's court records that are reviewed and school records and financial records. They look at the offense as well. They speak to law enforcement, victims. What did the prosecution say about a pre-sentencing report? Anything about that?
Yeah, so the prosecution didn't have as long of an argument today, Jesse, as maybe the defense did, but the government kind of pointing back to case law and saying that they're happy to be working with the probation office. I will say that there was a part, this was after the judge had initially denied Sean Combs bail and being able to walk out of the courthouse today. And I did see when Maureen Comey was making these arguments on behalf of the government that Justin Combs was kind of sitting inside the gallery, really kind of shaking his head. So it seems like from the government's point of view, they just want a little more time to get everything in order in terms of having Sean Combs sit down with somebody, I guess, from the probation office to kind of really do an interview. But the government was like, you know what, the statute is clear. The only thing that's exceptional about this defendant is his wealth, the violence, and his brazenness. He's an extremely violent person. He showed no remorse. His brazenness is unmatched. He used prostitutes. He assaulted Jane, and it was not self-defense. And then the government said something that I don't even think we heard at trial, Jesse. The government said that he invited Jane to the hotel room where Sean Combs was ultimately arrested, where he had the drugs, where he had the lighting set up. And then the defense was kind of, I think, a little upset by the government's argument there because Mark Agnifilo said, you know what, listening to Miss Comey makes me appreciate that we have jurors. But either way, at the end of the day, bail is still denied for the defendant. So Sean Combs isn't walking out of that courthouse today. He'll go back to MDC Brooklyn, and then we'll see what happens next at his sentencing hearing, or at another hearing prior to that. But then
we'll talk about that. Didn't Mark Agnifilo, push back a little bit? Didn't he push back on the judge's decision a little bit? He had some things to say.
A little bit or a lot of it, Jesse? I think it was more kind of a lot of it. So during the defense's argument there, Mark Agnifilo making these arguments, he said, you know, Your Honor sat through this.
It's a dismantling. The culture is shifting right before our eyes. People aren't asking if Diddy's guilty. They're wondering who else is. The walls are closing in. The shadows are thinning. And the truth? It's louder than ever. Because right after the verdict, 50 Cent didn't just talk. He dropped the first of what he claimed to be a series of vault tapes, recordings, files, and scanned contracts, some dating back over a decade. Allegations that several major events, supposedly meant for charity or celebration, were in fact fronts for orchestrated and highly controlled private parties, where consent blurred, power dynamics ruled, and reputations were traded like currency. The whispers became screams. Insiders are coming forward. Anonymous voice distortions are flooding streaming channels. Former drivers, assistants, even security detail are breaking years of silence. They're confirming what 50 laid out, that this wasn't one man's misstep. It was a network. Protected by wealth, masked by fame. And as more files drop, more names get dragged into the light. At least 3 more industry figures have reportedly lawyered up since 50's initial drop. One has already fled the country. Rumors say a high-profile stylist destroyed an entire hard drive. Why? Because once those files go public, there's no turning back. No PR campaign can compete with visual proof, with transcripts, with timestamps. Meanwhile, 50 Cent continues his crusade with precision. He's not yelling. He's not ranting. He's releasing content like a prosecutor, not a rival. His language? Cold. Calculated. He's not just trying to bury Diddy. He's trying to exercise an entire era of entertainment built on exploitation. The public's reaction has shifted from shock to demand. People want to know everything. Who was there? Who knew? Who helped cover it up? Fan pages are turning into investigation boards. Reddit threads are piecing together photos, guest lists, digital footprints. It's no longer a news cycle. It's a hunt. And yet, not a single A-list celeb has come forward to defend Diddy. Not one. That silence? It's not loyalty. It's fear. Because if they speak, they're next. And 50 knows it. He's already teasing another drop, claiming this one will change how we view 5 of your favorite artists. One entertainment lawyer called it a legal and cultural earthquake. Studios are locking down their archives. Contracts are being quietly re-reviewed. Syndication rights are on pause. Streaming platforms are re-evaluating featured artists. This isn't a scandal. It's an extinction event for an entire way of doing business in the shadows. And 50? He's grinning. Not because of Diddy's fall, but because he's finally pulling the curtain back on the industry that tried to blacklist him, sideline him, mute him. And now, they're all watching, helpless as he turns their secrets into headlines. Stay tuned, because what 50 Cent started might just finish the entire illusion of celebrity protection as we know it. And if you think it stops with Diddy, you're not ready for what's next.